For those of you who were with us on Monday evening and helped to create all of those colorful maps, I know that to some of you it may have looked like a bunch of scribbles. Thank you for all of those who wrote actually what these colors were. It helps us because essentially the first thing that we do after that is this right here. And you say, well, what is that? Well, that is what we call a schematic diagram. It's intentionally very cartoonish. And what it represents for us is kind of a consolidation or a distillation of everything that we heard from the public input session on Monday evening, combined with our planning expertise. And out of that comes sort of the first initial ideas for the concept plan. Just to get you oriented, because this is a map, here is the river front. Here is Main. Here's the bridge coming over. Here's Bridge Street right there. There's Company heading out right there. So this is our study area. And what this map does, besides consolidate the issues, is it starts to address things like land use and form and character of development. It is not simply a land use map. It's not simply a form map. It's not simply a transportation plan. It's all of those things combined, because all of those things have to work together to create a successful downtown. But just to kind of get you sort of set you up for some of the things that we're going to be looking at later in the presentation, I'm just going to talk about some of those general ideas. Real quick, I just want to point out that this red area here, which is really the historic core of downtown, is intended to be just that. The form of that is a more downtown type feel with a mixture of uses. Outside of that, this area right here that's sort of orange to you on the screen is sort of this kind of a transitional area. It's still mixed use, but we heard a lot about the potential of infilling residential in these areas. So it's things like that. This area here that shows up sort of pinkish or light purple on your plan is an area that is well within the floodplain of the river, but is right along. It's kind of between the edge of the core and the Gold Star Park. And so it's important to think about the sort of transitional type uses that might occur there. The green, obviously, are civic spaces, and then the blue are actually civic type uses or institutional type uses within the downtown. From a transportation standpoint, this red asterisk represents that many people identify that intersection of Bridge Hill and Company as really the middle of town, or the heart of the town. But we also heard a lot about this one-way couplet and improving that and making it better. And that small asterisk represents cleaning up that intersection there. So, from that point, from that schematic diagram, which we actually roughed up by about 1 o'clock on Monday and presented to the steering committee and got their feedback, and then turned around and started work on looking at things a little bit more detailed, this is the concept plan that actually starts to look more like a realistic site plan, where you see the buildings, you see the streets, you see the river, and you see all of those elements. And we're going to talk about those in detail, so I'm not going to go through that here, but just wanted to point out some of those key physical planning concepts. Stronger connections from the downtown to the riverfront. That riverfront is, if not it's one of the greatest assets that you have. And to make a stronger connection, to invite people to get down there to that and use it even more, is a critical piece. Street intersection improvements. As I pointed out, we have a network of streets here, but there are obviously some issues at these intersections that could be improved. Also, street redesigns or streetscape improvements that just would overall help the the downtown streets become more pedestrian friendly for the community. We heard a lot about enhancing the courthouse space, especially on the east side, as it is a kind of an axial view down to the river, or excuse me, the west side, that would be. And then, of course, one thing that we heard unanimous from every table is rehabilitation, saving and rehabilitating your existing historic buildings, because that is what makes downtown Minnetonka unique. And where there are opportunities for infill or new development that might occur, it should be in a form that is compatible with the other development in town, historic fabric. So, downtown gateways. We're going to start to get into a little bit more detail here, and my colleagues here will hit on some different elements. I'm going to talk a little bit about gateways and some of the historic, some of the architecture-related elements. First of all, gateways are hugely important. They make a first and last impression. I think one of your greatest gateways right now is that bridge. I don't know how you all feel about it, but I think it is a beautiful, beautiful structure. I think it's a little dingy and probably needs to be cleaned up, and maybe there could be the railings could be repainted and freshened up. It could have some additional banners on the lampposts that are on the bridge, and maybe even be illuminated itself to highlight its structure. But I think it's a really critical, and we all agree, is a very important gateway to your downtown.
And by the way, what's about Alabama DOT?
About getting their approval. Yeah, in order to do that, that's going to be something that the Alabama DOT is going to have to approve. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with suggesting that.
All the paperwork is in their office and they have
Yeah.
to accomplish that.
Awesome. So you're already making strides towards that. So other gateways. Obviously, Company is up there. Company is another gateway to town. Not the greatest gateway into town. Something that could be enhanced over time. It's definitely something to consider. But despite the way it may look as you come in, there's a definite change from the character as you go out towards 231 and coming in right there at that Company and is it Orline? Orline. I always want to call it Orlean or something. And that intersection, there's a great opportunity to create a gateway there. And then, of course, down here at Main and Ready, again, a real transition point where you go from, at least in terms of Main there, a more suburban pattern of development to a very urban one. And that's a great opportunity through signage or some sort of architectural element to really identify that you're coming in to downtown, that this is a destination and that you're there. As far as historic buildings go, you need to establish, and we're going to be recommending this, establishing a program to rehabilitate your historic buildings. As I mentioned before, this was an important issue to the community, and we were actually remarking about this. I'm not sure that we've ever done a charrette, or at least not in recent memory, where every single table, and it was said so much, save what we have, almost every single building. And that, I think, is hugely important, and it goes towards this recommendation of establishing that program. They do help, those buildings do help to create your brand and help to remind you that this is a unique place and other visitors. So it's a critical part of making a successful downtown. So what should that preservation program include? A local historic district. Now you have a national register, but that is different. It has advantages to it, but only the local historic district can really start to help to preserve what's there. And you do that through a preservation ordinance that has design guidelines for people who are wanting to rehabilitate their buildings. And it also establishes a design review commission that will help to manage and administer those guidelines. It's a critical piece, and Phil will talk a little bit more about that later. And some of you may have seen this slide the other night. We used it again tonight. Just some potential improvements. that, that are important for